Hi, this is Jeff Altman, the Big Game Hunter, and you are either watching JobSearchTV.com or listening to No BS Job Search Advice Radio. I'd like to spend some time daily talking with someone about some aspect of job search because I believe it doesn't have to be so hard, difficult, painful, or just take as long as it does. It's just the skills needed to find the job are different than those needed to do a job. And from time to time, I bring a guest on, just like I used to do on my old show, Job Search Radio, and talk with them because they carry an expertise that I think would be helpful. And today, I've got a goodie. He's another podcaster, by the way, and I'm going to see if I can pronounce his name correctly. His name is Chris Villanueva, and he owns a resume writing service. I love the name of this, and I'm going to pronounce it normally, and then I'm going to pronounce it with the punctuation. The name of his resume writing service is Let's Eat Grandma. Now, I want to make sure you hear the comma that's between Let's Eat and Grandma. And just recognize this is not about cannibalism. Chris, welcome.
Jeff, thanks so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be on your show.
So I've got to ask you, how the heck did you come up with that name?
So there's an old joke that says, it's a grammar joke. It says, if you take the comma out of Let's Eat Grandma, you're saying you want to eat your grandmother. And we are not cannibals here. We would rather eat with her. We're polite people. So we've chosen to include the comma. So it says, Let's Eat Grandma. And to be honest, I just thought the joke was funny, and I thought it was unique and different than all the other resume services out there. So that's why we chose Let's Eat Grandma.
It's hysterical. So today, folks, we're going to talk about resume myths and mistakes, because I know I've looked at hundreds of thousands of resumes. You know, when I used to work in search, Chris, you write them and you're fixing up all the garbage that's out there because they're discovering it's not working. What would you say myth or mistake number one is? And are you going to differentiate between one and the other for us?
I think I will a little bit, and I'll launch into what I think is probably one of the most common mistakes and possibly one of the hardest ones to grasp. And that is the idea of a one-size-fits-all resume. So the concept of having this general document and spraying it out to as many employers as possible. And for me, it's not only a mistake, but it's a huge time waster because people aren't being targeted and they're not getting the results they want because they're trying too much to appeal to everyone. So
it doesn't work because after all, the broken watch is right twice a day. And the generic resume sent to every single job. Do you think that really does an adequate job of selling your credentials for that role?
I don't think so, Jeff. And I think people need to get specific. I don't think they need to go crazy and write 50,000 different versions of their resume and spend an entire work week and just tailoring and tweaking their resume. I think that could be a time waster itself. But I do think that there is an in-between. There is really that area in which people should be tailoring the resume. And for me, my biggest piece of advice is to look at the position title level. So look at the actual position title you're applying for. So let's say you're applying for a sales manager position and you're applying for a sales director position. For me, those are two uniquely different job postings. And so I would recommend having two different versions of resumes for them.
Agreed. And I think, I used to do a lot of technology recruiting, and thus the language I would use is you create a resume that has objects to it that you can plug and play into the different versions of the resume that you can create a master from that might be useful if you're crazy enough to post it on a job board. Does anyone use job boards anymore to find work?
People do use job boards. And it's funny, I just had dinner with someone who owned a job board, and I think some do it better than others. I think some job boards are way too focused on the companies rather than the job seeker. But listen, I want to see if you agree with me on this, but I think people should apply for through job boards, but I think they should also go through their own personal network. I think that's another mistake people are making, is that they're only applying through these online job boards.
Oh, yeah. The statistics are clear and depends on whose you look at, but the most conservative numbers I hear are 70% of positions are filled through networking. 70% of the 70%, 49% in total, come as a result of introductions to people that your network knows who you don't. Job boards, the number I see is 6%. That was the most common number I found. And recruiters fill 22%. And I round both of those up to 30.
Right.
And I'm also aware that there are third-party contingency recruiters who use job boards. So I just lump it all together. But still, almost 3 out of 4 jobs come as a result of networking.
Exactly. And as a resume writer, oftentimes I'll deal with clients who are in transition. So they're going through a career transition. For me, that puts me in a tough spot because I have to write this resume for someone who has no experience applying for a job that they've never had before. And that puts us in a tough bind because a lot of the times these recruiters are typing in certain keywords looking for specific job titles, which they don't have. So I recommend for all career transitioners to use their network. And if they don't have a strong network, to go out and network as much as possible to physically get the resume in the hands of someone who can make a decision, not just blindly submit to these applicant tracking systems. And I think that's where a lot of job seekers get frustrated and a lot of them start to not get very good results.
Yeah.
So I think you and I agree on that tremendously. So
Yeah, it's natural to give up when you don't have results. You go into the cave, you lick your wounds. Oh, I'm sending out lots of resumes, and I'm not getting any result. Oh, it's terrible. It's awful. And okay, you can cry. It's okay. Give yourself a poor baby, but the idea becomes, what are you going to do?
Exactly.
What are you going to do to fix the problem?
I cry too, Jeff. I think it's fine to feel sorry for yourself a little bit, but after that, like, get going, like, go have a strategy, change it, and find the one thing that's not working and fix it and move on and try something different, because you'll get your result you want. You just got to keep trying. So.
And here I'm going to be self-serving. and if you can't figure it out, hire someone who knows the answer, whether it's a resume writer, a coach. Hire someone who can help you because you don't know what you're doing. You're an amateur at this.
It helps. It really does. That's good advice. It does cost some money. It is a little bit of an investment, but it saves you money in the long run, because if you land that job quicker, then you're going to be getting paid. So
absolutely. So we've covered a couple of things already. What's the next myth or mistake on the list?
Okay. You're going to like this one or not. Let's see. But it's blanket answers. Your resume should not have blank. Your resume should not have interests. Your resume should always be absolutely traditional in format. So it should not have this. It should not have that. Your resume should always be one page. These blanket answers really upset me because it goes back to the first principle of tailoring and targeting your resume. Now, I tend to agree with most of these things. And when I'm writing resumes, traditionally, I would say 90% of them are not fancy. They don't have this crazy logos and designs. But let's delve a little bit deeper into that. This is something that I had to learn as a resume writer, and it's a stance I used to have. I used to say, hey, your resume should always be traditional, conservative. But I was looking very closely at some of the companies that my clients were applying for, and a lot of them were very, let's just put startup-y here in Austin. And some of these companies, it just made sense to have a resume that had somewhat of a culture fit for those companies. So that's why I don't knock these resumes that have a design. And let's just say, for instance, I'm applying for a design position. We have a lot of tech people applying for UX, UI positions, in which you have to show that type of creativity. And it just makes a lot more sense to have a resume that's geared and tailored for that. So is that making sense so far?
You're making perfect sense. You're always thinking about the audience. What does the
Yes.
audience want to see or know about you in order to have their interest and curiosity piqued? And the notion that you're just another drone submitting a resume with 4 keywords or terms in it, at times will be enough. But then you're just like everyone else. How are you going to stand out? And that's a theme for me, is how do you stand out from your competition? And
Exactly.
in interviewing, there's one way to do it. In your resume, some people's interests are pretty dull. It's not going to get you interviewed, let alone hired. But then there are those of you who do have really interesting um, hobbies, interests, and such. That will
Right.
be a conversation starter.
Right, exactly. And so like I'll go online just to see what other resume writers are saying and what other recruiters and job decision makers, and I'm always blown away by people's absolutes. They say one of the questions on Quora was, should you include interests in a resume? It's going back to the same thing. And one recruiter was so adamant, he's saying just you should never, ever, ever, ever have interest on your resume. And I agree to him to some extent. A lot of the times these job seekers are putting interest in the resume and it just doesn't make sense. And 95% of the time I will not include interest just because of the types of positions my clients are applying for. But let's say, for instance, I am applying for a sales position in a startup in which the culture fit is really important. I might say, hey, interest might be one of the most important things you put on your resume aside from your experience and your skill set, just because you want to show you're a good culture fit. But again, caveat, just make sure you're looking very closely at the company you're applying for and the type of position, because it's that matters the most above all else.
And I'm going to make this one extra thing here because we're in a time of political polarization. And thus, your party affiliation, and I've seen those on resumes, your support
No
of a
way.
particular
Amazing.
your
Wow.
support of a particular candidate, with rare exceptions, should not be on your resume.
Wow.
Just think of who you don't know who the other person is and what their belief system is. And you have the right to say, well, it's too bad if they don't like. Okay, your prerogative too. Shoot yourself in the foot. It's okay. Let your search take longer. Your choice. Your choice.
I agree with you wholeheartedly. What a mistake. The closest I ever came to that was a client who had served on a campaign for someone. But that's a little that's hard to hide. But you're right. You got to be neutral about it as much as possible.
Yeah, there was one time where a lot of the experience was someone who worked on the Obama first campaign. And there was a not-for-profit or a nonprofit in New York that, funded by the Clintons and the Bushes and a couple of other political people. And for that organization, because we knew the culture, we knew that would be fine. But fundamentally, never, ever shoot yourself in the foot and eliminate half the US population by your support of one side or the other.
Wholeheartedly agree. That's excellent.
Thank you. So what else would be excellent or stupid that people do?
All right, got one. So a really annoying frustration of job seekers, I'm sure you know this, is they have to write a resume that's tailored for the position they're applying for. And they also have to submit an application with form fields that have almost every single thing that they just listed on the resume. It's a reality and it's an unfortunate truth of the job search in the modern landscape. The issue that this causes is job seekers don't want to fill out those application form fields as thoroughly as possible. And I really don't blame them, because I think that the application system is broken, it's redundant, it's causing lots of issues. However, after speaking to a lot of recruiters and hiring decision makers, one thing that they'll tell me is that these application tracking systems, the keywords that they're actually searching and scanning for, are not just coming from the resume, but they're also coming from those application form fields that job seekers are not filling out thoroughly. So It may not be a resume mistake directly, but I know this is something that's holding back a lot of job seekers. But they need to make sure to fill out those application field answers as thoroughly as possible. And that's because if you're not filling it out and not trying to hit some of those specific keywords, you're not going to get picked up by these application tracking systems, and you're going to be thrown to the very bottom. So
yeah, and it surprises me that the tracking system wouldn't be parsing the resume. In days of old with the early ones, there was no resume parsing. It was awful. And I know my son is going through a process now. He's completed a training program. He's looking for his first real job in his new field. And he's in the restaurant business. He's in the food service business. And a lot of these systems are old systems that don't parse resumes. It's bizarre to me.
And there are many types of resume applicant tracking systems. That's a mini myth I would also like to bust, is that there is one application tracking system. They all work the same, when that's not the truth. There are many different types of applicant tracking systems, and they work differently. They have different algorithms. Some of them are dumber than others. Like, they're not all smart. They're not like Google. But it's something that I think job seekers should be wary of, is that when they're applying online, trying to play the game can be really tough.
Yeah, and
it really can.
And I'll go to the thing with a resume and the applicant tracking system. If you're responding to an ad, and by the way, never, ever apply to a job through an applicant tracking system if you can avoid it. Always try and back channel to the hiring manager, because after all, you're going to the ever popular black hole. Why would you put yourself through that if you can avoid it? But let's assume you can't.
Yes.
You got to do it. You want to use the same language from their job ad in the application, because you can't assume that the algorithm has been programmed to recognize. I'm going to pick something relatively simple. In the ad, it says AR, for accounts receivable. And on your side, you have the words accounts receivable. This is very simplistic, but we can't assume that it recognizes, and it's been programmed in its data dictionary, that AR equals accounts receivable and will push you through. Always give it their language back to them and make it easy, as though a 6-year-old is going to be looking at the resume.
I agree. And we just, in our last podcast, we had a psychologist and a job search expert who said the same exact thing. You need to look at the language that people who are writing these job descriptions are using, and try to match that as much as possible. And that it's a truth, but it's still something that frustrates me, because I know that a lot of the times when people write these job descriptions, and we just had this conversation yesterday, but a lot of them are a little bit outdated, and a lot of them they're written by people who don't understand the field very well. But it's still going to be what filters out the resumes and what gets people's interviews. It's a broken system, but it's something we have to work around.
Exactly right. We're stuck for now until there's a better way of doing it. And for now, it's systems, it's email, and a few other things that just are a problem. We're not even going to address LinkedIn profiles. But the idea becomes the system is keyword oriented. Yes. And you want to make sure that your resume reflects the keywords that are in descriptions. And thus, the mistake here is they should know. They should know that, and they may never know, because they may never see it, for a human being to make that association. So how many more we got? How many more?
Perfect. Well, Jeff, there's a bunch, but I'm trying to cover the main ones. I have 2 mini ones. Is that okay? They're smaller. They're easier. Okay. They're minis. Okay. Thing number 1, you got to look for consistency throughout the entire resume. I review a lot of resumes. I bring people in person here in Austin, and I sit down with the resumes. People send a lot of resumes online. One of the biggest mistakes I see when it comes to design or phrasing is consistency throughout the resume. So I'll delve into what that means. Let's look at design, for instance. If I have a header that is in bold and underlined, and it's a top line header, so it's specifically the words experience, education, summary. You know what I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Making sure that every single one of those follows the same exact format and very precise level. That's a really simple example, but you need to look fairly closely at every single design element from your paragraphs to all of your header levels. So I think everyone should just look at the resumes right now and go through a checklist to saying, is all my design consistent? Because it's something that's often overlooked. And on a subconscious level, whether we believe it or not, design is the first impression that recruiters and hiring decision makers, that's the first thing that they look at. So design is incredibly important, and consistency is probably the thing that holds everything together.
Right, because when I used to look at resumes all the time, and I've looked at hundreds of thousands of them, one of the things you notice are the mistakes. My eye would go to mistakes all the time, and those were spelling errors, those were design errors, and my eye picked up on it. I know interviewers are the same way.
And you're looking at so many resumes, and you're probably looking for a reason to say no to somebody because you're in the filtering stages. So that's why I think like a mistake or an error or a typo, whatever it is a really good reason to throw somebody in the trash. I don't think it is at its core a good reason. I mean, I make mistakes, and I don't think you should, not consider me. But when it comes to something like your resume and you're competing against 110 other resumes, you got to make sure it's spot on.
Yeah.
All the little details.
Don't give people the reason to say no.
Mm-hmm.
Don't make it easy for them to do it. Do it in a way that they want to talk with you and dig in deeper. You said you had one more mini?
It's a mini. This is something that most people don't do, and I recommend it. I'm trying to touch the unconventionals, things that people would say, aha, oh. This one is including your LinkedIn profile at the very top of your resume. I think people should get their LinkedIn act together, whether or not they have a really solid profile. But in a lot of cases, I think the resume should be getting yourself to the interview stage or getting someone to engage with you on a further level. And I think LinkedIn is one of the best ways to do that. And I think that's where a lot of the hiring is moving nowadays, is LinkedIn. I've spoken with many recruiters who just use LinkedIn as the way that they're vetting for candidates as opposed to resumes. And I think any way you can get someone to look at your profile or get someone to further engage with you is a good thing. So as long as the profile is good. Yeah, as long as the profile is good, because if it's trash, then that's going to be another reason to throw you out.
And it has to be congruent with the resume.
Yes. Don't be a chameleon. Don't be completely different.
If it's on the resume, it needs to be in the profile, and vice versa. So there's a consistency to it. Otherwise, people will sit around and go, I smell like the title of my podcast. No, it's BS. Yeah, I smell BS. Yeah. So you want to make it easy for them to say yes and not easy for them to say no.
Yes.
Thank you. You don't want to make it easy for them to say no to you. You want to make it you want to make it comfortable to say yes. Sorry.
Exactly.
One more major. You got another major?
Oof. Okay. Got to end it strong.
I got one.
Go ahead.
No, you go ahead. You're the guest.
Listen, okay. I want to go back to what I said. I don't think I covered this enough. I said it in a sentence earlier, but it's something I know a lot of job seekers are freaking out about, and it's the length of the resume.
Yes.
And I'll go back to it and I'll say that there is no one size fits all answer. And I think that's one of the dumbest things that a lot of resume writers and recruiters are perpetuating, is that your resume has to be this. It has to be one page. It has to be whatever. And that really upsets me, because there are several instances when your resume should be longer than one page, and I'm okay with that. I think, for instance, let's say you are applying internally for a company and it's you versus another person, and you're not going to get filtered out by an applicant tracking system. I think it's okay to go a little bit more in depth on your job descriptions and to have a little bit more flesh and a little bit more meat on your resume. Whereas if I was applying through an application tracking system or something else, I might say cut that resume down. But I think that's an instance where you should have more than one page. Or let's say you have a lot of relevant experience that dates back a long time. Relevant experience, that's the key word I'm trying to go for here. And you have that experience. How could you possibly cut that down to one page without really making it seem bad? You know?
Senior people have permission to go 2, maybe 2.5 pages tops. The however is when you think about how people and systems look at resumes, people will go 2 page downs on a resume. Because remember, no one prints out a resume. They read it on a screen. How long do you think? How many times will they scroll to find where it is? Now, 2 page downs, they're looking for keyword terms in the quick scan. Because remember, 6 seconds is as much time as you have. And that's from years of data collection. And I used to do it in less time. So you got 6 seconds max to find the terms. And if you think they're going to click down that 3rd page down, no one ever does. So it's got to be earlier in the resumes, and the systems are, if you're applying that way, are programmed to look for them earlier in the doc rather than later, because later is viewed as old information.
Right. So I always tell people, if there's something you absolutely have to communicate, don't leave it on the 2nd page. Like, kick it up to the 1st page, and even if it's absolutely irrelevant, take it to the top half of that 1st page. I had a client who the most relevant thing on their resume was volunteer experience, believe it or not. And this was at the bottom of the 2nd page, which is a very common place to put volunteer experience. But one thing I recommended for this person was to take that experience and bring it to the summary, just to give a quick sentence about it. And this is something that helped them. But no, wholeheartedly agree. If you have something that needs to be shown, don't leave it to the very bottom of your resume if it's a 2-pager or worse, a 3-pager. But
they'll never find it.
No.
They'll never find it. I'm going to add in one extra: embedded headers. Because some of the applicant tracking systems struggle with embedded headers, and then you're asking them to manually input it, the greater the likelihood is that they're going to delete it rather than make the corrections.
Okay.
So, Chris, this has been great. How can people find out more about you and eating grandma?
We don't want to eat grandma. I cannot emphasize this enough, but I love that. So we are Let's Eat Grandma. It's a resume service. We do have the domain name, so it's let'seatgrandma.com, or you can Google Let's Eat Grandma resume service. Don't get us mixed up with the band that does not have the comma. It is a very dark band. And so that's our service. You can submit your resume for a career score. Otherwise, I'm the host of the Career Warrior podcast. We post on Mondays and Thursdays about fun stuff like this. So that's me.
Super. And folks, we'll be back soon with more. I'm Jeff Altman, the Big Game Hunter. Hope you found this helpful. And if you watch this on YouTube, I hope you click the like button and subscribe to my channel. You'll see that little icon in the lower right-hand corner, and we'll have a great opportunity to share more with you. And I'm also going to mention my website, thebiggamehunter.us, has thousands of posts that you can watch, listen to, or read to help you find work more quickly. If you're interested in my coaching you, there's a link, or actually a button on the homepage. You can schedule a free discovery call with me or schedule coaching with me, and we can dive right in. Hope you found this helpful, and hope you have a great day. Take care.